Right now, the February 2026 winter storm is officially over, but the crisis in the United States is not. As of this morning, at least 108 people across more than 20 states have lost their lives. 16 of those deaths occurred right here in New York City, where people were found frozen on sidewalks and in doorways during the coldest stretch this city has seen in years. In Tennessee, 14 more are dead across 8 counties. The storm that began on January 23rd and finally weakened by January 27th left a trail of devastation stretching from Texas all the way to Maine, affecting more than 200 million Americans. Right now, hundreds of thousands of people are still without power. At the storm's peak, 2.5 million customers lost electricity. Many waited days in freezing temperatures for the lights to come back on. And while utility crews have been working around the clock, the damage from ice-coated power lines and toppled trees means some families may not see power restored for another week. But here's the thing. This is not just about what already happened. The National Weather Service is now tracking another winter system moving toward the East Coast this week. Arctic air is returning, and cities from the Carolinas to New England are bracing for another round of snow, ice, and dangerously cold wind chills. Here's the important part. This was not just one storm. This was a collision of systems that exposed every weak point in America's aging infrastructure. From power grids that could not handle the ice, to airports that canceled more than 20,000 flights, to emergency shelters that ran out of beds. The February 2026 winter storm is now the deadliest winter weather event to strike the United States since the Texas power crisis of 2021, which killed 250 people. And the systems that failed then are failing again now. In the maps and satellite loops from late January, you can see exactly how this system formed. Around January 21st, a powerful low-pressure system began to organize over the central United States. It drew moisture from 2 sources, the Gulf of Mexico to the south and a stream of Pacific moisture that had crossed the Rocky Mountains. At the same time, a massive Arctic air mass was plunging south out of Canada, bringing temperatures well below zero across the northern plains. When that frigid air collided with the moisture-laden storm system on January 23rd, the result was catastrophic. Heavy snow began falling across Oklahoma and Arkansas. Freezing rain coated everything from eastern Texas through Louisiana and Mississippi. Ice accumulated on power lines, some places seeing nearly 1 inch of frozen buildup. Tree limbs weighted down by ice snapped and crashed onto roads, cars, and homes. By January 24th, the storm was moving east. Cities that rarely see winter weather were paralyzed. Little Rock, Arkansas recorded 6 inches of snow, shattering a daily record that had stood since 1899. Oxford, Mississippi was under a shelter-in-place order as ice storms made roads completely impassable. In Tennessee, a freezing rain mixed with sleet-buried communities under inches of ice. 14 people would lose their lives across the state. The storm swept through the mid-Atlantic and reached the Northeast on January 25th. New York City recorded 11.4 inches of snow in Central Park, a record for that date. Parts of Massachusetts saw more than 20 inches. Dayton, Ohio measured 12.4 inches, the heaviest 24-hour snowfall in the city's history. At its peak, the storm had placed more than 200 million people under some form of winter weather alert. By the time the storm finally weakened on January 27th, at least 108 people had lost their lives. Some froze to death outdoors. Others died in traffic accidents on icy roads. 3 young brothers in Texas drowned after falling through ice on a frozen pond. 6 people were killed when a business jet crashed during takeoff in a snowstorm in Maine. The causes of death stretched across the entire spectrum of winter dangers: hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning, structure fires, and vehicle crashes. The infrastructure damage was staggering. More than 20,000 flights were canceled between January 23rd and January 26th, making this the largest flight disruption event in the United States since the COVID-19 pandemic. LaGuardia Airport in New York, Dallas-Fort Worth, and airports across the Northeast Corridor saw thousands of travelers stranded. Some waited in terminals for days trying to rebook. At the peak of the storm, over 2.5 million customers lost power. In the South, where ice accumulation was heaviest, utility companies warned that restoration could take a week or more. Crews from neighboring states were called in, But freezing rain and impassable roads made it nearly impossible to reach down power lines. Families huddled under blankets in dark, cold homes, waiting for heat that would not return for days. And the cold did not stop when the snow did. As the storm moved offshore, Arctic air poured in behind it. Wind chills dropped to life-threatening levels. In New York City, the extended cold snap would claim 16 lives, most from hypothermia. Across the affected states, temperatures remained well below freezing for days, complicating recovery efforts and leaving vulnerable populations at extreme risk. When you step back from the day-to-day updates and look at the human toll, the scale becomes overwhelming. The American Red Cross launched one of its largest winter disaster responses in recent history. More than 125 warming centers and emergency shelters opened across the affected states. On the coldest nights, more than 2,300 people took refuge in those shelters, sleeping on cots in school gymnasiums, community centers, and church basements. Walk into one of the emergency shelters still open tonight. Gym floors are lined with cots and folded blankets. Children play quietly with donated toys, while their parents huddle around extension cords trying to charge phones. Volunteers from Angels in Motion and Beacon of Hope distribute food bags and hot meals. Caseworkers from local aid organizations help connect people experiencing homelessness to more permanent shelter options. The air smells like instant coffee and donated pizza. It is warm, but it is not home. And there is another crisis unfolding that most people have not heard about. According to the American Red Cross, the storm forced the cancellation of hundreds of blood donation events across more than 20 states. Thousands of units of blood were lost at a time when hospitals were already dealing with trauma cases from vehicle accidents and cold-related injuries. Blood banks have issued urgent appeals, but donations remain far below normal levels. Hospitals are rationing supply, delaying elective surgeries, and stretching their inventories as thin as they dare. And where they are waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. In New York, where 16 people died during the extended cold snap, Mayor Zohran Mamdani announced that preliminary findings indicate 13 of those deaths were caused by hypothermia. 3 others appear to be overdose-related. None of the victims were living in homeless encampments at the time of their deaths, according to city officials. They were found on sidewalks, in doorways, and in unheated buildings. The city has since opened additional shelter beds, but advocates say the capacity is still not enough. In Tennessee, the death toll reached 14 across 8 counties. Governor officials mobilized the National Guard to assist with power restoration and wellness checks on elderly residents. With the Tennessee Department of Military confirmed that fatalities included vehicle crashes on ice-covered highways, hypothermia cases, and at least 2 deaths from carbon monoxide poisoning when families used generators indoors without proper ventilation. In Mississippi, Governor Tate Reeves confirmed at least 10 storm-related deaths. The state saw some of the worst ice accumulation, with reports of more than 5 inches of ice in some areas. Power outages stretched into their second week for some residents. Utility crews worked through dangerous conditions, clearing fallen trees and replacing snapped power lines. But the sheer scale of the damage meant progress was slow. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear reported at least 10 fatalities, including one person who died from hypothermia in Jefferson County several days after the storm passed. The extended cold was as deadly as the storm itself. Texas reported 9 deaths, including the 3 young brothers who drowned in a frozen pond. Indiana also confirmed 9 fatalities, several involving children. Here is the important part. Tennessee, a state that rarely sees this kind of prolonged ice and cold, has extended its statewide emergency order. Utility companies are still pre-positioning crews for the next storm system. Emergency management officials are coordinating shelter capacity. Airlines have issued flexible rebooking policies, anticipating another wave of cancellations. FEMA has deployed resources to multiple states, working alongside the National Guard to assist with power restoration, supply distribution, and emergency shelter operations. The Department of Energy issued an emergency order from January 26 through February 2 to strengthen the electrical grid, allowing utilities to run backup generators and pull power from neighboring regions without penalty. But the response is stretched thin. Red Cross volunteers, many of whom have been working nonstop since January 23, are exhausted. Shelter capacity is reaching its limit. And with another winter system approaching, the question is not whether these systems can handle more stress, but how much more they can take before they break completely. They are waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. For millions of people, the January 2026 winter storm revealed something uncomfortable. America's infrastructure is not ready for extreme weather, and it is not getting better. Start with the power grid. In the South, where ice accumulation was heaviest, the problem was not generation capacity, it was distribution. Ice-coated power lines sagged under the weight. Tree limbs snapped and fell onto transformers. Wooden utility poles, some decades old, cracked and toppled. In states like Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee, miles of power lines had to be replaced entirely. These are not systems designed for catastrophic ice storms, and yet they are seeing them more frequently. Experts have been warning for years that trees growing too close to power lines are a disaster waiting to happen. When ice or heavy snow weighs them down, they become battering rams against the electrical grid. Much utility companies say trimming and clearing costs money, and regulators are reluctant to approve rate increases. The result is a grid that fails predictably every time a major winter storm rolls through. Transportation infrastructure also showed its fragility. More than 20,000 flights were canceled. But the problem was not just weather, it was hub congestion. When major airports like Dallas-Fort Worth, LaGuardia, and Chicago O'Hare shut down, the entire national network stalls. Planes are out of position. Crews time out. Passengers are stranded. The hub-and-spoke system that makes air travel efficient in normal conditions becomes a single point of failure in a crisis. On the ground, highways became parking lots. In Kentucky, Interstate 75 was closed for hours after multiple tractor trailers jackknifed on ice. In Tennessee, sections of Interstate 40 were shut down due to accidents and unsafe conditions. Emergency responders struggled to reach people in need because the roads themselves were impassable. There is also a deeper climate signal. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means when cold air and storm systems do line up, the result can be heavier snow, more intense ice storms, and larger swings between unseasonable warmth and dangerous Arctic outbreaks. The January 2026 winter storm fits this pattern. Record warmth across parts of the South in early January was followed by one of the most severe Arctic blasts in years. The whiplash is becoming more common. And it is not just the power grid. The blood supply system dropped significantly during the storm. Hospitals depend on a steady stream of donations, and when weather cancels hundreds of blood drives, the entire system teeters. It is a fragile supply chain that most people never think about until it is too late. Emergency shelters, too, are running at capacity. Many of the warming centers that opened during the January storm are still housing people because their homes remain without power or heat. Volunteers are exhausted, donations are slowing, and another storm is approaching. The question now is not only how to rebuild, but how to make sure the next winter storm does not push the same systems even closer to the breaking point. That means investing in grid resilience, especially in the South. It means rethinking how we manage trees near power lines. It means building redundancy into transportation networks. And it means preparing for a future where extreme weather swings, both hot and cold, are more frequent and more severe. Tonight, the January 2026 winter storm is fading from the maps, and another system is still approaching. The National Weather Service is tracking a new winter storm that could bring additional snow and ice to parts of the Carolinas, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast later this week. Some of the same communities that are still cleaning up from the last storm are now bracing for another round of dangerous cold and possible power outages. But for millions of people, this winter will be remembered not by storm names, but by nights spent in cold houses, by long lines at shelters, and by the quiet fear of wondering what happens if the lights go out again. And yet, in the middle of all this, there are stories that remind you what resilience actually looks like. Neighbors running extension cords to each other's homes so someone can plug in a space heater. Volunteers driving hours through dangerous conditions to staff emergency shelters. Utility line crews working 16-hour shifts in freezing rain to restore power. Hospital staff stretching dwindling blood supplies to make sure every patient gets the care they need. 108 people lost their lives in the January 2026 winter storm. That number's final. But the systems that failed them, the infrastructure that could not protect them, and the decisions we make about how to prepare for the next storm are all still unfolding. We will keep tracking both the science and the human stories as this historic winter continues to unfold. If you found this update useful, consider sharing it, subscribing, and letting us know how these storms are affecting you and your family. And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and stay prepared. How do you think your community should change after what this winter has revealed?